I'm Lois Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, and we are part of the coalition that you heard a fair amount about last night. We're proud to bring the faith voice to that coalition. PIN's been part of Pittsburgh United pretty much from the beginning, and we we're pretty much involved, I would say, in all of the Pittsburgh United issues through different leaders. PIN is a coalition in Allegheny County. It's a coalition of 50 congregations that are churches, mosques, synagogues, religious congregations of women, some faith-based organizations like Casa San Jose that you're going to be hearing about in a bit. We're part of the Gamaliel Network nationally, and with the Gamaliel Network, we've been focused. I would say the big change, and this relates very much to Pittsburgh United, the big change that we made as a network about 2 years ago is over a period of time we realized that too much of our work had been focused on the consequences of race and poverty. And while we were focused on the consequences of race and poverty, the needle was moving in the other direction. So we made a decision about 2.5 years ago that we would focus our energy purely straight up on the structures, knowing that that was a long-term process and knowing that that implied that we had to do some internal work to look at our own racism, our own bias, our own privilege. And so we're in the process of doing that here in Pittsburgh. But the other thing that it made us realize is that you can't go after the structures of racism and equity as any one organization. It requires all of us. It's going to take every bit of our energy from labor, faith, community, and environment, and anybody else who is of like mind and like value. So you're going to see a lot of that today, and I'm hoping that we will be able to demonstrate some of the intersections that make it possible to go after the big things, not the things that move the chairs around. Thank you.
Thanks, Lois. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Raffanon Kennedy. I'm the Managing Director at Pittsburgh United. That basically means I manage our staff and work with them to create the campaigns that you've heard some about last night, and we'll hear a little bit about today. But I wanted to just bring us back to what Lauren Jacobs shared with us last night, that we really have to find the intersections, as Lois said, in our campaigns and in our struggles, so that we're building power not just for one thing, but to win what we need to see in our community to build an equitable city, and an equitable region, and an equitable state. So you'll be hearing about that this morning on the tour from partners, community organizations, amazing organizers, as well as this afternoon from a panel, and then on through till tomorrow. So we hope you'll be excited to engage with us about that. And I'm just going to be a moderator this morning. Pittsburgh United is just a piece of the ecosystem working for an equitable city. So I just want to highlight the folks that are going to be speaking this morning, and I'll introduce them really quickly now, and then be moderating throughout. And if you have questions, feel free to throw those out, and we'll have a great bus tour. As I said, we're going about 26 miles through many different neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. We'll see a lot of different neighborhoods and development sites, and so we're excited to share our city with you this morning. First, we'll hear from Celeste Scott, who's an affordable housing organizer with Pittsburgh United. We'll hear from Larry Meadows, who is with Homewood Children's Village. I'm not going to try to say his long and important title and all the things that he does, so I'll let him introduce that. We'll hear from Black Rap Medusa, who is an artist with One Hood and also a former organizer with the Fight for 15 here in Pittsburgh, and has been deeply part of the worker and artist organizing community here. And we'll hear from Rebecca Flora, who will meet at the Almano site, which is short for Allegheny, Monongahela, and Ohio. It's a development site that Heinz is deeply invested in, and we'll hear about equity metrics and other pieces that they're developing around that site. And then we'll head up to the hilltop in Beachview to learn a little bit about Casa San Jose with Monica Ruiz and Sister Janice Vanderneck, who work with Casa San Jose and do immigrant justice work here in our community. So we'll be covering a lot this morning, and I'm excited about that. Are there any questions to start? We were moving so quickly, and now we're here. So we're heading up into the Hill District. And you'll see the site that you heard about last night, the Civic Arena site that was torn down to build a new stadium for the Penguins. And you'll see that that's a place that still has a huge lot vacancy where homes were. And was very much what you heard about last night in terms of the struggle to control how development happens in our city. That was a fight that we entered into with the Hill District Consensus Group. And today, one of the things that we're working on with the Hill District Consensus Group is water infrastructure. So over the course of 10 years, we've done lots of different work together, and it really runs the gamut. So you won't be able to see the water infrastructure, obviously, in the Hill District. But we fought together for green infrastructure in the plans to rebuild our sewer system, and now more recently are working to stop privatization of our water and sewer authority, Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority. And so we just have I think you'll hear over and over today that we have relationships in place where we're always trying to be nimble to be able to respond quickly to the advocacy that's needed. And have those relationships in place so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time we have a fight to fight. And to, again, find the intersections in our struggles and not start from scratch when we need those relationships to build power and control our community. So I'm going to hand it over to Celeste Scott and Larry Meadows to each introduce themselves a little bit and begin talking with you about affordable housing and development here in Pittsburgh.
My name is Celeste Scott. I am the affordable housing organizer for Pittsburgh United. A little bit about me is I was raised in public housing here. You will see that a lot of the public housing in Pittsburgh has been demolished. Where I grew up has been demolished, and that is the case here. So that's a little bit about me and why I do this work. And I'm really, really happy to see everybody. And this is really exciting for me, so thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Larry Meadows, Jr. I'm with the Homewood Children's Village, pardon me. I am the Director of Program Development and Community Engagement, and I double as the Director of Child and Community Health. My background is finance and accounting. I did project management at the Port Authority of New York for 10 years, managing $300 million in projects there. All of that was after Hurricane Sandy, so I had a heavy eco-environmental focus, a lot of climate change studying, and I bring that experience to Pittsburgh. I also grew up in Washington, D.C. and New York, both basically fully gentrified areas now. I don't recognize D.C. when I go home, and Brooklyn, which used to be one of the most dangerous places in the United States, is now the most expensive place to live. So coming to Pittsburgh 7 months ago, I've seen the structural and the first levels of gentrification where they start fixing up the infrastructure. You start seeing more foot patrol by the police. You start seeing development companies come in. So I'll be infusing some of that experience in my conversation today as we go through Homewood. So that's it for me.
So here we are. You can see this parking lot over here. This where it's very full right now is the site of the old Civic Arena. Previously the site of a big swath of the Hill District neighborhood.
And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about my affordable housing campaign and my affordable housing work and how we came to it. So the campaign that I lead, it actually started in 2015, but I came in 2016. Seems like longer. And so it started with a lot of policy work. We were on the Mayor's Affordable Housing Task Force, which was bankers and lawyers and elected officials, nonprofit developers, community advocates, and labor union representatives. And from that came a lot of recommendations about affordable housing that Pittsburgh United and our partners, we play an important role in crafting and contributing to implementable recommendations and best practices on affordable housing and the crisis facing Pittsburgh. So there was a national consultant called Mullen and Lonergan that came and did a needs assessment for Pittsburgh and what we need to address our affordable housing crisis. So I just wanted to go over some of those stats with you. So the problem in Pittsburgh, so there's 45,485 households that are paying more than they can afford for housing. That's roughly 1/3 of all Pittsburgh households. That's very significant. There are 23,405 households that are paying more than half of their income on housing costs. And so there's a shortage in Pittsburgh of nearly 20,000 units that are affordable and available to households earning at or below 30% AMI. So for the area median income here, that's $24,000 for a family of 4. So you can imagine that's nothing to try to raise your family on. So the average rent has increased by 159%. So it used to be $500 a month to $794 a month. And that's since 2000, I'm sure that's changed. The average rent for a new 2-bedroom apartment is $2,163. So we'll be seeing some sites that are in it used to be called East Liberty. I'm indigenous to Pittsburgh, so we called it East Liberty. When you see gentrification, they changed the name. So now I think they call it East End, maybe? East Side. East Side Bond, well, yeah. So we will look at those sites. East Liberty is very jarring as far as what gentrification looks like in Pittsburgh. The displacement is very jarring, and you'll be able to see that. And we'll go over what happened there. So the minimum household income needed to afford a new 2-bedroom apartment is $86,510, and that's over twice as much as the average Pittsburgh household earns. So it begs the question that we ask a lot here: who is Pittsburgh affordable for, and who can afford to live here? Okay, so we are in the Hill District, and to your left you will see the Hill House Association. The Hill is very rich in culture in Pittsburgh. I'm not indigenous to the Hill, but a lot of my family members are. I've spent a lot of time here. So you'll see down here is like the cultural district. You'll also see a lot of places that are just storefronts that used to be vibrant businesses. The Hill was very much like the second Harlem, a very beautiful place, like East Liberty, a mecca of Black culture. So you will see some murals and things that were painted to kind of deal with the blight. But we know that behind that blight is, are people that have been displaced and lost their homes.
And as we passed the Civic Arena site that they talked about, which was an entire parking lot, the history of that is the city used eminent domain to displace a lot of residents from the Hill, largely African-American population, and a lot of those people who were displaced ended up in Homewood. As they ended up in Homewood, white flight took place after that, and as we go through Homewood, I'll tell you more about how it went from Andrew Carnegie's home to a middle-class neighborhood to a very diverse neighborhood to an African-American neighborhood to what you will see today.
Solutions that my affordable housing campaign believes are 3 steps to help close that huge affordable housing gap. The first one is eviction notice. So we will go past Penn Plaza. There were 500 people there that faced eviction with just a 90-day notice. So the policy solution for us would be at least a 12-month notice to all tenants before any act of displacement and $1,600 or in relocation assistance. So that's the first policy. The second, and you will really see an example of why this is needed when we go through East Liberty, is inclusionary housing. So, excuse me. So a combination of course, mandatory requirements so that developers will be forced to have to include affordable housing in their developments to make the revitalization affordable for all Pittsburghers. And the last one, which we're really proud of, is the Housing Trust Fund, which is now the Housing Opportunity Fund, which will be $10 million that will be dedicated to dealing with the affordable housing crisis. It will be equitable citywide, it will be impactful, and we're really proud of that. That legislation passed this last December. It is the first citywide affordable housing policy solution that has passed in Pittsburgh. So we're really proud of the advocacy that we did to push and pull for that with our coalition partners, SEIU 32BJ, SEIU Healthcare PA, and Lois, who is amazing, who is here with Penn, was really instrumental in helping us to get that policy passed for people. Sure. And so also, our table started with about 4 organizations. It is now up to around 28 organizations. Some of those organizations at our table are Homewood Children's Village and Casa San Jose. We found out with the Opportunity Fund, for it to be implemented and to be effective for folks, that we're going to have everybody at the table to be looking at that and making sure that that $10 million is equitable for everybody. So we've gone from 4 organizations to 28 organizations. I'm really proud of the fact that we have a lot of Black folks at that table, Black trans women, and of course our Latina brothers and sisters at the table as well with Monica. So there's a lot of work being done in the city, and I'm like just really proud of everything that we're doing with that. Oh, okay. So Quinn wanted to know more about the 90-day eviction, what happened with Penn Plaza, and to elaborate on that, we're going to stop at Penn Plaza and see the site. But what happened is we have a private developer here named named LG Realty, and what happened is they wanted to redevelop the location. So there is a very large development of about 312 units that housed about 500 people that was affordable for everyone, that they wanted to redevelop into a Whole Foods, 300 market rate units, and parking. So they wanted to get everyone out in 90 days, and that's where the 90 days came from. They put signs on their door and told them they wanted them to leave in 90 days. Our partner, Action United, had a lot of members that were in that household and in those buildings, and they came to Pittsburgh United, and we were able to give them resources, and they formed a tenant union and tenant organizing to fight that. So they were able to get a year before they had to leave. So that's what I mean by the 90 days. I'll talk about it more when we're there, and you'll be able to see the one demolished building and the second building that's still standing. The 12 months is so that people will have time to be able to find a suitable place to go. So that's the time frame that we would like people to have if they're going to be a mass eviction of 20 units or more. So that's where the 12 months came from.
Another question? Yeah. You had mentioned that you had asked about relocation assistance. Is that part of what they do now, or are you still working on trying to get them to do relocation assistance?
Just so everyone knows, the question was about relocation assistance and how that was included at Penn Plaza, and a little bit about how that is being fought for as a policy.
So what happened with the relocation assistance is the tenants got together and they actually went down and had a meeting where 185 tenants showed up, and the mayor and the tenants were able to work together to do an MOU, and part of that MOU was that they would get $1,600 to help them with relocation. So the tenants there, they didn't want to stop there. They didn't want this to happen to anybody else. So they themselves wanted to fight for this policy, and there was general consensus around that. We don't have the policy in writing yet, but there is a political will to do it. So we would hope that people would be able to have moving monies and other monies that you need to be able to successfully relocate your family when something as devastating as a mass eviction will happen.
That money would come from? Money would come from where?
The money would hopefully, ideally, come from the developer that wants to redevelop the site. If they want to redevelop, they should be able to pay that money to the people.
As we're heading toward the Penn Plaza site, do folks want to just say, try not to fall down? Do folks want to say anything about how this might compare to the landscapes where you work or fund or are looking at? just as we're heading toward the site. I'm sorry this doesn't move further, so if you have a comment, it would have to be a little bit loud, or I could repeat it. Are people seeing similar patterns or policies in their areas?
Hi. In Boston, there was a ballot initiative that was passed at the end of the year that also created the opportunity to raise funds for affordable housing, open spaces and historic preservation, the Community Preservation Act. And there are a number of groups working together to work with the city on identifying ways to make it the most equitable as possible, the distribution of the funds when they're available. So I'm interested in understanding the coalition of the 28 groups, how you get together to develop like an equity assessment tool or a way to assess how those funds would be distributed equitably.
Did you hear that question?
Yes.
So the question also there at the end was how are the organizations that are working together developing tools to make sure that funds are distributed equitably, particularly through the Housing Opportunity Fund?
Right, and sort of like what is their equity measures, and racial equity, and how do you get there?
Great. I will hand that over to Celeste to talk a little bit about. And this would be also a good chance for me to mention that there will be a breakout group about housing and anti-displacement strategies and policies over lunch where you can ask even more detailed questions. And we'll have a couple of other breakout groups as well. But I'll hand it over to Celeste to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, to help with the equitable distribution of the funds, Pittsburgh has 90 very distinct neighborhoods. So the Opportunity Fund, as it was passed, has an advisory board, which is 15 people now. It's very community heavy, so there will be people on it like nonprofit developers, someone that represents a tenant organization, as well as one representative from each neighborhood. So over here, that would be East, West, North, and South, so that they would have a say in what happens to distribute the funds. There are a lot of different needs in Pittsburgh. We heard from a lot of different people citywide that the need is more towards rehab, neighborhood stabilization versus building new, because we know gap funding would cause that $10 million, the minimum of $10 million to be used very quickly. So those are some of the mechanisms that we have in place for when the fund is implemented to be able to have equitable distribution. There's also some language in the legislation about neighborhoods that have been redlined and have historical disinvestment, being able to, see some of that, the capital, and to be able to do what they need to do in their neighborhoods as well. So there is that mechanism in place for that. I hope that answers the question. There's going to be actually Bob Danewood, who helped us, he's from Regional Housing Legal Services, will be with me at a table to do a deeper dive if you'd like to do that. So here we have it.
In Homewood, we started a program called the Urban Leadership Institute. This is a program that's cross-generational. We have retired individuals all the way down to high school students. We train them up to be activists, advocates, and ambassadors for Homewood. We train them in health and wellness issues as well as sustainability issues. One of the topics that comes up every time we talk about development and gentrification is the displacement of the long-term residents and the elders there. There's several retired individuals who are on fixed income. They're very afraid of development because they've already seen the housing prices go up. The rent prices have gone up approximately 200 or 300% in the past 15 years in the greater Pittsburgh region. In Homewood, it's a very low-income neighborhood, so it's moving slower, but the actual property values are starting to increase significantly. Vacant lots, which you probably could have gotten for under $10,000, are going for as much as $30,000 now. Completely abandoned homes that are gutted are going for upwards of $100,000. So the elders of the village are very much afraid of what's coming. We have been trying to figure out a way to reduce or slow down the displacement. I'm new to Pittsburgh, but I hear that it's a home state rule here, where Philadelphia is the only first-class city. Pittsburgh is a second-class city. which means that the state can step in and overrule some of the things that we try to do here. I was on a trip maybe back in April, and a young lady from California said that they had proposed a bill to reduce or limit how much property taxes can go up per year to 2%. I talked to some people in Pittsburgh, and they said that that probably can't happen here because of that second-class city rule. So there are many things that we're trying to do. We work with our partner, Operation Better Block. They have a Tangle Title program for people who pass away and leave their homes to their children, nieces, nephews, etc. If those people don't properly know how to get the titles in their homes under their name, when the community development comes, they could lose those homes, which takes the power away from the actual residents. There's also a lot of rental properties. There's a lot of senior citizen homes there. So all of those residents are very much worried about what's coming down the road very soon.
Okay, so we are coming up on Penn Plaza here. The people that you see that were over there in the hard hats are part of the developer, Lawrence Gunberg Realty. So they are out there. This particular location, oh, I'm sorry, to your right, my apologies. You will see the building that has been left standing, that has not been demolished at 5600 Penn Avenue. And so we'll stop here and we'll talk about this for a moment. But this used to house over 500 people. Action United, I have to give a shout out to Angel Gober, who you'll meet tomorrow, who's now with One Pennsylvania. She came in here and she knocked every door and made sure that even though people still got displaced, people were able to have some sort of choice on where they went. Most of the residents here were elderly and disabled Black folks. So this giant hole in the ground really does represent people's lives and people's homes. So yeah, I think it's just really important to be here and to see what this looks like as a mass eviction that happened here. The reason that the other building is still standing is that the tenants themselves, along with community support, they came out and they fought. You'll see an intersection up here. We literally set up a living room in the middle of the street to represent the fact that the units around here, they couldn't even find a place literally across the street from them to go to. The waiting list around here for a subsidized housing unit are 2 to 5 years, and Section 8 voucher use in Pittsburgh, about 70% of them aren't able to be used or are not used. So that's also significant here.
Every time you see something like this, this affects what the Homewood Children's Village does. We partner with 3 schools in the area: Lincoln Elementary School, Faison Elementary School, and Westinghouse High School. Every time families get displaced, those students go somewhere else. We track their performance, and when they leave, we can't track them. Their family doesn't have transportation. There's a lot of issues in terms of where they can get services that they're very familiar with in their neighborhood. When they get displaced, they have to start all over again. So whereas, I'll give an example. Lincoln Elementary School, there was another low-income housing project that was shut down over by the new Target in East Liberty. 50 students from our school ended up leaving. So we went from, Lincoln Elementary School went from 250 students to 200. So just from that one area getting shut down, 50 kids left our services. And these are services that once children work with us for over 100 hours in tutoring, their grades increase significantly. If they stick with us for more than 200 hours in a year, their grades can go up almost 1 full grade point. So this is not just, you know, a brick and mortar structure. These are people's lives that are affected. Children's ability to thrive and succeed in school is affected. So, you know, this is real what's going on right now.
So we are going to be going through what is called the commercial core of East Liberty. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so back in the days, everyone from across the city would come over here and shop. It was like a mecca of Black culture. There would be street vendors and culture and food. So we see a lot with gentrification where that culture is erased with the illusion of making it safe for people. So you will see that a lot of the businesses that used to be indigenous to this community that were low-income entrepreneurs and street vendors have turned into stores like, I think, Bonobos and other high-end stores to kind of supplement and make the development, which is all luxury units up here, to make the people feel safe and to erase the people that have lived here, put their time in here, raised their families here, and have had to leave here. So you'll see an example of that. If you look to your left and to your right, this is the commercial part of East Liberty and Penn Avenue that used to be very, very vibrant with Black culture. And you'll also see to your left the Kelly Strayhorn Theater, which is also of note, that still remains here and is a mecca of Black culture. I also wanted to mention that Jamil's, which is coming up over here, and is a very, very important business that has been here for 25 years. We're about to lose it because the landlord is, not because he can't afford it, but has decided to go in a new direction. So we're gonna lose one of the best and irreplaceable Black businesses in this community, family owned, is gonna have to move. So that's definitely something of note, in that we have to do the work to make sure that these things don't happen again, and that people that want to live and stay in a neighborhood where they have grown up in and invested in and have been raised in, when the investment comes, that they're able to have some say in that and to have a choice. So up to our right is another development that's called Eastside Bond, and it's owned by a developer called Mercedes. This is an all luxury unit, no affordability, all market rate, $15.6 million in public subsidy and tax breaks, no affordability again. The average rent here is $1,315 for a micro unit, which is not even a studio apartment. So you see this to your right, it's a transit-oriented development. Another thing of note in Pittsburgh is our busway, which everybody now wants to be close to. You'll see it to your right, kind of below here, where this development is. So this is the East Liberty station, and in Homewood, there's the Homewood station, and it goes all the way out to a borough called Wilkinsburg. So that is another thing of note that's happening with development, is going up our busway and displacing people. So we'll be going through Bakery Square. I got some questions yesterday about the Google Mall. You want to say something?
So the low-income housing that I was talking about, as we go through this light, it's right over on the other side of the Target. They just shut down all of those units. You'll see them with wood on the windows and everything. It's straight through these trees right here. Those are the ones that shut down. Lincoln Elementary School is walking distance from here. So you can see the kind of the brick structures over there. They shut that whole area down. You see the fences around it, and all of those children were displaced, as I mentioned. I don't know what schools they're going to. It's very hard for us to track the students after they leave Homewood. We work with Pittsburgh Public Schools as well as the Federation of Teachers in the city of Pittsburgh. But once children are out of the neighborhood, it's very hard to keep in contact with them. So.
Okay, so to your left and to your right is Bakery Square Mall. Actually, it's up front, I apologize. But you will see the sign that says Bakery Square. That's where Google is at. And to your right is Bakery Square 2, which is luxury apartments again. They got over $15 million in public subsidy, no affordability. And the average micro unit here starts at about $2,500, which is, as I talked about, the income levels that are here, even in the city, inaccessible to people. So
this is not a one bedroom. This is a efficiency.
Yeah, it's not even an efficiency. It's just like a room. And then we have to our right Uber, which is also a self-driving car, and that's a problem too. So that's a problem. You'll see how modular these units look, like they kind of dropped them upon us. They don't fit here. They don't have any of the good bones and beauty that this neighborhood used to have. And also Bakery Square used to be, Barney can tell us about, a Nabisco plant. So when this took over, Google is over here too. To your left, you'll see LA Fitness and Google and a whole lot of high-end restaurants that nobody in the neighborhood either works at or can afford to go to, really. So that is my piece, and sure, here later.
So when Bakery Square first opened, and this is also walking distance to Homewood, we're about to go through Homewood in about 2 to 3 minutes. A lot of the students from Westinghouse really were happy about this. To have something new to walk to, they came over here and immediately they told us that they were made unwelcome there. They felt unwelcomed. They didn't get service. People were looking at them funny, making comments like, you know, why are they here? So the students came to us like, you know, did we do something wrong? Like, what's going on? And you know, as people that they look up to, we're we know what's going on, but you know, I don't want to jade the way they're thinking. So we were just like, oh well, we don't know. You know, it's kind of be nice and keep going. But that's one of the things that happens when the face and the color of a neighborhood changes. People who look different are sometimes made to feel unwelcome, man. So.
Yeah, and I just wanted to conclude with this. This is a booklet that Bob Daimler, who you'll see, largely had a part of, called Black Homes Matter, and I can get you a copy of that if you would like. Alternate approaches to neighborhood revitalization in the city of Pittsburgh. So the question is, whose neighborhood is it? As disinvested neighborhoods are redeveloped to attract a new demographic, what about the original residents? Do the people who struggle to keep the community alive through disinvestment and poor public services still belong? And so here are some quotes here. I live here. I'm from here. My whole family is here. We try to stay close together. This is America. I'm a Marine. I went to war 3 times. I served my country. It feels crazy not to be able to live in my own area where I grew up. And that's from Jaquay McAtee from East Liberty. So these are real people that have been displaced. We have Chris Ivey, who's doing the videography for us, who's an amazing documentarian. I encourage you to look up East of Liberty. If you haven't seen it already, it's an amazing documentary about the gentrification and displacement of East Liberty. So I'm really happy to have Chris here with us. And just thank you. And I hand it over to Larry, who's amazing.
Okay, so we're in Homewood now. Homewood used to be like basically a forest, a big park, but due to the steel mills, actually this is one of the new businesses to the left, the Wheel Mill. It's a bike park, an indoor bike park. Smaller businesses are starting to come to Homewood. Back in the day, there was nobody here, but due to the steel mills and the terrible air and gook and smut, Carnegie and Frick and all of the barons moved out to Homewood because they could afford to come out here. They eventually opened it up when there were 4 train lines that came out to Homewood. There was a migration from the city out to Homewood. It was mostly middle white class. After that, Italians and immigrants started coming here. Germans, they were made to feel unwelcome, but they had a place. A few African Americans came here, and they were kind of let to come here. But as they started moving in, as I mentioned before, white flight kicked in. You'll see most of these buildings are boarded up and shut down. In the 50s, as the Civic Arena was built in the late 50s, a lot of those residents came out to Homewood. When that happened, most of the middle class white residents moved away. They moved out to Penn Hills and Monroeville because there were shopping malls, cars came about, and all of a sudden, all of the investments in Homewood were starting to leave. The people who had money here, the city stopped investing in Homewood. This is the Homewood Library on your left. This is one of Andrew Carnegie's big things that he gave to Homewood. They had to fight him for it. He wanted to give a much smaller library, but they fought him on it, and he ended up giving some money. There's also the African American Music Institute to your left, one of the few cultural organizations left here. We're coming up on North Homewood Avenue. This was the main business strip in Homewood. Because it was a train town, everything was right here for residents to walk to. It was very small. Residents could just walk to it. They could meet their neighbors and everything. But with the development of the train lines and cars, all of a sudden people could move around. They didn't want to shop at the same shops that they had been shopping at forever. So they ended up moving out to Monroeville and out east and to the Penn Hills. And, you know, they had a mall that they can go to, and they had homes where they could have 2-car garages. So everybody who was in Homewood, all of a sudden, as the automobile came about, they could leave. What happened was a lot of lower income people moved in. A lot of people started renting out rooms in their homes as the population went up. The population went from nothing to 30,000 up to 40,000. And once the minorities and the low income people started moving in, the face of the neighborhood changed. It was not as homogenous. People started customizing their homes and doing stuff to their yards, and it was too much diversity for some people. So what happened is everybody started leaving, so the population started dwindling. The civil rights movement came. There were riots. More people left. African Americans wanted different stuff. They started making more money, so they moved out. So what you have left is a neighborhood that's been disinvested. We still have some cultural icons here, but this neighborhood over the past 30 to 40 years has largely been disinvested. Homewood is one of the flattest areas in Pittsburgh. That is like a gold mine for developers. We have been working with the Homewood Community Development Collaboration, which is an organization of about 8 or 9 local organizations here. We work with our partners, Operation Better Block, the Community Empowerment Association, the YMCA, the YWCA, and we are trying to establish guidelines for any developers that come into Homewood to say, you have to hire some of our residents. You have to have clean building materials. So if something happens to one of these sites, it's not going to provide a health crisis for the children who are walking by. You have to have diesel particulate engines that filter out the diesel particulates because they're the worst for human lungs, and they're worse for young lungs that are still in development and running around playing sports because you're breathing in more air. So we are working with a lot of community organizations to try to hold on to this neighborhood to make sure that the residents who are here actually can take part in the coming increase, improvement, if you have it, in the economy that's going to happen here. We met with University of Pittsburgh. They're going to open up a community center right down here to the left. I think we're turning down Homewood Avenue. We're not. Okay. So over that way is CCAC College, the Homewood Children's Village headquarters. This building right here on the left is the Health Center on Hillary. They partner with us on a lot. And a couple of this was a very popular bar right here. It was called The Phase. One of my fraternity brothers owned it. There's no grocery stores in Homewood. This is Soul Food on Hamilton. There's 3 soul food spots, and you have like a little corner store here and there, but there's nowhere to get groceries or vegetables or fruit in Homewood. So that's one of the things. It's a food desert. You see a lot of these homes. This is what our children see every day. Walking to school, they see blight, they see graffiti, they see empty vacant lots. There's not a lot to be hopeful for around here. I'm 42, so I get it. I had parents who told me to strive for more, but a lot of the residents here, they've seen 40 years of disinvestment. The children have only seen vacant lots and broken down homes. There's violence here. There's a lot of violence in Homewood. It's slowed down as of late, but Homewood was notorious for the violence that happens here. There's a lot of shootings every year. Up here on the right is another barbecue spot. And the food is very good. Don't get me wrong.
Yes, it is.
It's delicious. But not very good for you in terms of, being healthy. Yeah, we also have Homewood's fire station right here. They actually are very active in the community. They do things with the community every year. So we're very happy about that. But this is Homewood. This is what it has become from Andrew Carnegie's house and his estate to a middle class neighborhood to a very mixed income neighborhood to a very low income and disinvested neighborhood. So now we have organizations that are coming back. There's 3 new development projects that are happening in Homewood. Some are market rate, some are mixed income. The community is afraid of what that's going to do. Of course, they have rental rates, but that doesn't mean that those rental rates won't go up as the market goes up. So a lot of people are very much afraid of what's going on. You can see to the right some new built homes there. They're not broken down, they're not torn down. And that's kind of what's happening. They're starting at the outskirts of Homewood. They're building up little pockets of houses here and there, and it's starting to move more towards the center. So we really anticipate in the next 5 to 10 years that this is going to look completely different because these homes are very inexpensive right now.
What's the proportion of home ownership to rentership in Homewood anyway?
She asked what the percentage of home ownership to rentership is. It's actually very low right now because Homewood's population as of the last census was 6,400. We learned from one of our partners that it's actually 5,300. They did a complete door knocking campaign. So it's down to 5,300 homes. There's over 2,500 empty houses and lots. Many of those 5 years ago were tax delinquent. About 75% of the homes in Homewood were tax delinquent. In the past 5 years, they've all been bought up by investors who do not live in Homewood. Many of those investors do not live in the country. So that's what's going on. The URA is selling homes around here like you would not believe in large swaths for very cheap. So like I said, the residents are not happy about it, but it's a business, it's a part of the system. What can you do?
We can organize.
We can organize. But you need home ownership.
So we heard a little bit about the task force, and we've seen some of these neighborhoods. The problem isn't that we don't have good strategies or policies that we can pursue. The task force came up with a great set of recommendations, but what we're seeing is that we need to continue to organize. We need to continue to push for the policies, for the funding, for the things that are necessary. Celeste and Larry and Monica and all the other folks who are part of the affordable housing table are working to make sure that that's community controlled, that it's responsive, that money is going where it needs to go, that development is happening in a way that's important to the community. And we need to push our elected officials. We need to push our mayor, his administration. We need to push our city council, and that we have to keep doing. We just have to keep fighting. So we're facing the Realtors Association. We're facing developers who are both in town and developers who are coming in, as Larry said, from all over the country and all over the place. So that's where we really have to come together and continue to build power. And one of the things that we're seeing as an intersection is that we really need to also focus on making sure that people have good jobs in our communities. We need to make sure that that workers have higher wages and benefits so that they have more choices and they can be part of what's happening in their neighborhoods. And I'm excited to introduce Black Rep Medusa, who will be sharing a little bit more about worker organizing and art. And if you have more questions about anti-displacement strategies and housing, we will have a table to talk more about that at lunch. Medusa.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melanie Carter, but I'm artistically known as Black Rap Medusa. Medusa is an acronym for making a difference using skills and activism. I am a hip-hop artivist, so I'm an artist and activist. Just to give you a little bit about myself, I'm originally from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Texas. I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in Africana Studies. On the campus of Pitt, I got politicized. I joined a couple different organizations such as Sankofa, Community Empowerment. Got politicized and became a rapper. Most of my work is really around Black women justice, around economic justice, and ending mass incarceration, specifically around the school to prison pipeline. Because as you listen to Larry and Celeste talk about the housing justice, one of the things that affect communities of color is education, is access to education that looks like cultural enrichment and leadership development. Because we're learning on a standardized testing type of curriculum, most of the youth are, most teachers are looking at 20 to 25 students in their classroom at a time, which does not allow any individual education to be happening. It doesn't allow for students to even gain a concept of how that education correlates to their actual communities. So I'm a part of a hip hop collective called One Hood. We're a group of artists who lend our gifts, skills, and talents to raising awareness about inequities and the disparities that are going on in communities of color, and making sure that we connect these communities from all around the city. So as we went through Homewood, I've actually worked with several different organizations in Homewood in building leadership development in our youth, as well as health and wellness. Talking about, we passed some community gardens that a lot of my allies and comrades have helped to build in the communities. Like Celeste and them were saying, there's no grocery stores. You notice that we didn't pass any grocery stores, no fruit stands, no vegetable stands. There's none of that. There's no access to healthy food in our communities. A lot of our children are eating hot fries and hot Cheetos and Takis on their way to school as breakfast.
Right.
So again, we're not just dealing with unhealthy habits, right? We're also dealing with unhealthy schools, education system. We're dealing with economic justice, right? Economic injustice. So a part of my organizing with the Fight for 15 was specifically around making sure that people understood that they had worth, right? Or even deserving of more. A lot of times I dealt with workers having 2 and 3 jobs and did not feel like they deserved more. They did not feel like they deserved more to work at McDonald's or to work at Wendy's or to work even at Chipotle. They couldn't understand why, you know, why I was there talking to them about it. Like, it's okay. Like, I don't have time for that. Like, I was like, well, aren't you worth more? And that was a real question. That was a real question where people had to actually see other people standing up to fight for what they deserve. We have plenty of workers who are facing eviction notices with 2 and 3 jobs, shut-off notices. So we definitely dealt with a certain element of economic justice or even worth, self-worth, within this community and within this society in general. So everywhere from sexual harassment to racial discrimination to just wage theft. McDonald's is a $1 billion industry, and their CEO makes about $8,000 an hour, while their workers are making $725, $750. Even I've known managers who've been in their position for years, 10 years, still making $925. Where they do that at? So specifically around what the Fight for 15 in Pittsburgh has been able to do, we've been able to, we had one heck of a year this year. And I just want to shout out all our partners at the worker table, Pittsburgh United, Penn, who else? Sierra Club, who else is on here? Who else is on here? Casa San Jose. Who else? Who definitely helped us? We had one of the major campaigns that we came into the year with was anti-Andy Puzder campaign. So I don't know if y'all know about this guy, but he was the nominee for Secretary of Labor. Horrible dude, right? Tons of love it. Tons of sexual harassment, tons of racial discrimination, tons of wage theft, and he was the CEO. We defeated him. We mounted a campaign with our partners, and we defeated him. We went to D.C. and we crashed those hearings. We went to Pat Toomey with thousands of signatures, and we let him know, don't vote for this guy. We went out into we petitioned our communities and talked about a real thing. If this guy gets in here, he's not representing us. He's not going to represent the working class people. So it's our duty to what? Fight for our freedom. So we defeated him. And it wasn't easy because here's some big millionaire against these people who are barely clearing $15,000 a year. So we won, yay for us, right? We went on to, we went from that to a 4-4 action where we actually, we wanted to commemorate Martin Luther King, who stood with sanitation workers in Memphis. The day after he stood with sanitation workers in Memphis, he was killed for trying to get these folks a union, right? So we wanted to honor and commemorate him. So we had a march and a rally. Again, with the help of our partners, we were able to have a successful march and rally, and where we were opening up dialogue about economic justice in the Black community. It was something that hadn't really been done. Even though we talk about it in pockets and conversations, we don't really talk about it in a mainstream way to begin to get people to recognize what their worth is. So that was successful. We participated in May Day, where we stood in solidarity with immigrants. It was raining profusely.
We were swimming down Carson Street.
But we made it. We stood. We were very impactful. We took over the South Side.
Yes,
you know, we took over. Usually, I don't know if you guys know anything about the South Side, but we've racially the South Side is not a place where it's like one of the major party centrals in Pittsburgh, but it's not a place where people of color feel comfortable to party. We're not welcome there. But we took over. Everybody, we took over, shut it down. Main Street, shut it down, and did that. We went on to go to Chicago. We went to Chicago for a shareholders meeting. And basically what that looks like is like McDonald's hosts a shareholder meeting every year. to tell their investors basically, hey, look at what we've done this year. But they are down this year. They are down. Their stocks are down. So that means that what we're doing, the campaign is working. We have over 345 Fight for 15 chapters across the country, and 60 different countries that have a Fight for 15 chapter. We've won raises for about 30 million people already. There's only 64 million people in the workforce in America. So we've been winning, and we've only been on the ground for 4 years. The minimum wage hasn't been changed in 10, so I'd say we're gaining some ground in that particular side of things. But as a hip hop artivist, it's been extremely hard to use hip hop as a male dominated industry to begin opening conversations about misogyny, right? To open conversations about what activism really is to us, because we know like the really sanitized word of it. Like we know what it looks like to talk about it, to organize, to fund for it, but we don't know what it actually means to people of color. Do people of color even show up to half of the rallies and marches that we even have? How do we open dialogue with them that lets them know that this is your fight? We've been, I guess, marginalized so much, right? Marginalized so much to where, what is the idea of unity? What does unity look like? And how do we begin to bring those conversations into a realistic way that creates sustainability? And I ask you this, what is a distressed community? That's a question.
It's not rhetorical.
Anybody want to take a shot at what a distressed community is? No? Okay. So, well, when we start to think about distressed community, I mean, for me, it's a sanitized word, because specifically we're talking about poverty, which is no accident, right? So distressed is like something outside or something inside of me. I'm just stressed out. But really, if poverty is no accident, then it's something that is being obviously oppressed on me. It's obviously something that is overtly outside of myself that is forming a situation. So we're heading into a community called Hazelwood. I also work out here. I am a teaching artist with One Hood. And again, I suggest you guys go check out One Hood. We've been doing things all across the country. Jasiri X is that guy, right? He's that guy that shows up at your rally and your march. He's that guy that shows up in your community. He's that guy that was on the ground in Ferguson and got arrested just for being there. Just for being there and articulating what's happening. You know, so when we see things, it's more than just not being silent. It's also doing something about it. What does action look like? And when we begin to take action, can we have unity in taking that action? Is your liberation bound with mine? And that's the key thing. Is not making sure that we're not, playing a savior. Okay, we're not looking for a savior. We're looking for. We're not looking for savior. We're not looking for help. We're looking for people whose liberation is bound together. Because that's the only way that we're going to get through this. If you see yourself as just helping me or just helping this community, then what's happened is that we're not going to get any sustainability. What's going to happen is we're going to be constantly waiting for that check. I mean, my money. Seriously.
Right.
So, but what we want is sustainability. What we want is for these people to be self-autonomous and to be able to have access to healthy food, access to healthy living. And economic justice is a part of that conversation, but it's not the whole, right? All of these movements and all of these justices are interconnected. And so it takes people who are dedicated and committed. I can lend myself to environmental justice, even though I'm focused on the justices that I know and have had the experience in and being involved with. But it's not to say that when we talk about sustainability, what all these justice needs to do is find a way to culminate, right? Find a way to bring it to a head where we all can find our position and all be able to play our different roles in the total scheme of things. So on an up note, right?
Right.
On an up note,
Yes.
so a lot of what I do is teaching artistry, leadership development, cultural enrichment. And when we talk about cultural enrichment, we want to. I don't know if you are aware that they are getting away from public schools. Okay, and they're going to charter schools. A lot of these charter schools will be owned by the prison industrial complex. So I repeat, a lot of these schools will be owned by the prison industrial complex, which is a very pungent thing. It's a very real thing. So if we do not begin to look at education justice, at economic justice, and at prison justice, right? Because a lot of the black community deals with mass incarceration in a very visceral way, right? A lot of my students have family members who have been incarcerated. A lot of my a lot of the people that I know are lifers, juvenile lifers. Pennsylvania houses the most juvenile lifers in the country. Okay, so this is a very real thing for us. Yeah, so when we talk about what the future, what solution-based activism looks like, right? It looks like actually talking to the community, right? So how do we talk to the community? How do we start these conversations with a community that doesn't feel it's worth more, right? So what we've been able to do with One Hood is go throughout these communities and facilitate workshops where people can feel, where people understand the relationship as youth. So not waiting for you to become older and try to figure it out, but as youth, you begin thinking about what you can do. What gift, skills, and talents can you bring to the table? And so I'm going to close with a rhyme, if that's okay. Is that okay? That's all right?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll jump on with you. Yeah, great. I'm Rebecca.
Okay. So,
Rebecca's going to start talking on the bus.
You can just go ahead.
okay, I just want to make sure So, unapologetically, black and I'm brilliant. What I'm lacking in millions, I stack in resilience. I'm the future of generations, the past of my children. Gentrified, what I'm gonna pass to my children. Look what they practice is building, the water's fracked in my building. I'm from PA with a murder rule sentence babies to prison. Cause of their living conditions. For their natural life, natural lullabies, please bless them, bless them, bless them. Don't question them why they stressing, they deli just face oppression, the belly, the back compression, hungry suicide, depression, addiction mixed with aggression, but they steady pressing. Yeah, they steady pressing. But what's the real motive of a country pushing dope in your community? Criminalize your eulogy, living life on the edge, but when you black, I seen they usually put you in the ground before you do the beat. We ain't free, and we ain't living like we supposed to be. I'm never living on my knees, you better bury me. All right, thank you.
We're here at the Almano site. We'll have time for questions after we hear from Rebecca Flora here on the site. She's with Remake Group, and she'll be talking a little bit both about the site and about the P4 metrics, or a little
Whatever you want. Absolutely.
the
Cover it all.
people, planet, place, and performance equity metrics that that Heinz and others are working on here in the city.
Great.
Thank you and welcome. Great to see you all. What a gorgeous day. Who would like to actually get out and do a little walking?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's too gorgeous to sit on this bus all day, right? I am Rebecca Flora, and I am the newly appointed director to oversee development of the site on behalf of the Almano LP. The Almano LP is essentially made up of three foundations in the city: the Heinz Endowments, Richard King Mellon Foundation, and the Benedum Foundation. Very, very unique situation here. What we're going to do, and I'll get into that a little bit more, what we're going to do is we actually, we're not supposed to come down this road. You were supposed to turn onto Signature Boulevard because we have the construction guys all waiting for you. You are going to be the first group to traverse our brand new road on this site, actually, because we've just started to wrap up construction. And so I'm going to make sure you make that turn back here, and we'll get actually on the site because we take all-wheel drive vehicles on the site. And so the bus at this size, we were trying to figure out how do we get you on the site. So anyways, a little bit more about El Mono. It is basically the name of the partnership. We're in the process of rebranding and creating a whole new identity for the site. It is very much, I think you all received a little bit of a diagram about the site. No?
We're going to get them off the bus.
Okay, you're going to get them when you get off the bus. Okay. What's really unique here is that, and we have Rob Stephanie, and I see Matt Barron back there, others from Heinz, or, okay. Who else is here? Harm, okay. Who can also break up and tell the story because they've been with it longer than I have. But what you see is this 178-acre site. It's a former steel mill site. It was very much part of the Hazelwood neighborhood, which you'll be seeing as we come out the other side. This site, basically, as we're driving on it now, this particular roadway was designed as a so-called complete street, and it is the major access road now through the site. And so you can get a pretty good sense of context, you know, city there, Southside neighborhood across the river. Oakland University District is up on the other side of the hill, and then the Hazelwood neighborhood will be coming out at the other end and talking more about how this site hopefully can be a catalyst and integrated part with the neighborhood. We're going to stop after you go through under the railroad underpass. We're going to stop on the other side of that, kind of across from where the new building is, and we'll get out there. Okay. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little. So what's unique is that what I keep telling people, this is not your typical real estate transaction. The property was bought back in 2002. If they had wanted to just sell off parcels, that could have been done years ago. What this is really more about is really a whole combination of things. How do you use this site and its redevelopment to be a catalyst for the adjacent distressed neighborhood? How do you essentially, you know, create really a regional asset in terms of the public realm on this site? How do you create a place for experimentation and innovation in terms of what we're seeing in workforce development as a whole new economy that's emerging right now, and the fact that we have workers that are not prepared for that? How do we use this as a place for those types of activities, and so that we actually leverage much more than just a vertical real estate development? And that's hard. It's really hard. So when we talk about, Jen, you mentioned P4. The P4 framework that we are starting to think about, how do we apply that? I'm going to talk about P4 separately, but I'm going to come back to that. How do you really measure what is true sustainable development from a triple bottom line standpoint in terms of just all the aspects of creating social benefit, economic and environmental benefit on a site in this type of market situation, which is still somewhat of a soft market? You know, we don't have extensive, highly aggressive absorption rates here. So we have an opportunity. We have a lot of things that we think we can do. We are just getting to the point where site preparation is nearing completion, where we can actually do vertical development on the site. We're just turning that corner. As you can see, you're actually passing over the only section of the road which we can't quite still yet finish because we're negotiating with the railroad. Same anywhere you go, right? And so anyways, you can see the bike path on the side there. That's what we mean by the complete street in terms of the infrastructure. Just go up in front of them, yeah, and then just kind of pull to the side a little. And so all of that in terms of how we handle everything from green infrastructure and stormwater on the site to complete streets, bicycle access, multimodal access. How are we even thinking about how we will get around in the future? This site is supposed to be about really driving and pushing that change. Let's get off. I hope you're up for that, and just get outside and we'll talk a little bit outside. I think Mike Barnard is going to join us from our project team also, so depending on what your areas of interest are, we can break up so everybody can be heard. And we'll jump off for a few minutes. And if you're up for it, we can sort of walk a little ways while we're off and just kind of move along, and then point out a few things like the old mill building here. So we'll just get off and then regroup.
Hey Rebecca.
Yeah.
I just want to that we're trying to ask and answer with the site. One, what happens when the foundations are identified, when we own it? Two, can you revitalize an adjoining neighborhood without displacement, and what do you need to make that happen? And three, can a new economy, technology that we've been incubating for 30 years, can be commercialized in a global setting to the benefit, not to the disadvantage of under it. Those are three things that we as owners are grappling with on a constant basis, and they are intense. So,
great. Thanks, Rob. And let's continue the conversation. Everybody should have a copy of this. Got it? Okay. So the Almano site, like I said before, is 178 acres. It's planned right now as a mixed-use development, basically, that'll happen in phases. This master plan allows for up to about 3 million square feet of development. Based on Pittsburgh's current absorption rates and depending whether or not this is what evolves over time, that could take up to 20 years to develop. So we're focusing on the first phase, which is centered around this building, the old mill building. It's called Mill 19 as a new development. And we're creating a sense of place around that with some public realm. And you'll see it kind of in the center of your map right here. And you'll see kind of this plaza area right on the side of it, which is on that side, the south end of it. So it gives you a visual sense. And then the neighborhood, which we're going to come out on the other side of, this is all the Hazelwood neighborhood. So we're really trying to sort of bring this back into and integrate it. Our challenge is the railroad, again, because it sort of cuts off, a lot of direct grid impact and connection to the site. So connectivity is a big part, physical connectivity to the neighborhood is really important. I think jobs development and training and sort of like who's working on the site and how do we train people now to actually be part of the site working there in the future, because quite honestly, I keep having a conversation with the neighborhood of construction's great, but you should really be looking long-term. What is going to be the long-term employment on the site and how do we help start training for that now? So we have a few partners we're talking to, like the community college, Carnegie Mellon, Pitt, others, to really think about, well, what's the long-term game plan here in terms of using this as a place to really create long-term employment, not just, a construction job that's going to last for a year. To be part of the neighborhood, that's going to be critical. So understanding what happens here, looking at for the long haul, those are sort of some quick basics. We have access to a large chunk of the riverfront that you see here, unfortunately not all the way across. And so, but we have about a 1.2 mile section of riverfront that is all, along there that there will be a future plan for a riverfront trail there. Another big part of that is how do we use the public realm to actually create another, way to connect with the community and have it be something that everybody's part of and everybody feels welcome here. And when I say community, yes, it's Hazelwood, which you'll see at the other end, but it's sort of the greater community too, that this is a welcoming, it's not a shut off gated site. Contrary to that, you'll see Uber at the other end, which has a fence. It doesn't help with our description, but they're an important part of the site because it's sort of really bringing the new economy. And the fence and the berms are really a lot about safety because they're doing automated vehicle testing there, and we don't want one of those vehicles going off and hitting somebody. So there's actually practical reasons why that's there right now. It's a 5-year license for them to be on the site, and we think with the pace at which automation's happening, no one really knows for sure what the needs will be after those 5 years, but it sort of helps get use on the site, get a way of activating the site right now. That's big picture. What I'm gonna, Matt or Rob, sort of on the big picture scheme, and then maybe add whatever you would like. And then what I'd like to suggest is we have Mike Barnard. Where'd Mike go? Mike's over there with a hard hat, the only one that is properly dressed on the site right now. I've got the vest, you've got the hard hat, so between the two of us. Mike is with Oxford Development Company. He's overseeing a lot of the construction on site. So if people have questions about the infrastructure, the stormwater retention areas, what we're doing around connectivity, some of those types of issues, how we've approached that. Mike can lead a group on that. I think Rob and Matt can talk very specifically, obviously, about the Hazelwood neighborhood itself, particularly as we are coming out the other side. I can talk a lot about the vertical development and sort of our market and how we're really thinking about what the future use and how are we approaching a strategy and everything around really attracting development to this site in the future. So maybe before we break into some of those groups, or suggest that you kind of look at those group leaders, do you have questions overall about kind of just the approach to the site and then we'll get into maybe some details. Does that work for everybody? Okay, so there's a question here. I'm sorry?
What was here before?
It was an old steel mill building. A whole steel mill. Yeah, it was all a steel operating steel mill. The hot metal bridge, which was further up the road, literally took hot metal from this mill and transported it across to what was a steel mill on the other side. And so our website has been updated and some great historical pictures. The Heinz Endowments have done some really great articles in their H magazine about that history and everything. What's really cool about this building, which is about a quarter mile long, is one of the original mill buildings. For us, it's what gives this site an identity and a sense of, you know, the history, and the designs for that building are really awesome. They're pulling the skin off and keeping the skeleton framing of the building and basically building buildings inside the building in phases for what'll be kind of advanced manufacturing, innovation type uses. But I think it's going to be iconic in terms of sort of a centerpiece along with the public realm activity that'll come along with it.
Can you talk a little bit about how the community has been engaged in the thinking about what was on the site?
Yeah, I'm going to start that, and then I'm going to point to Rob or Matt to sort of fill in. Property was purchased back in 2002. The market has changed and evolved since that time, and through that process, the master plan has evolved. And so through the various iterations of the master planning and the future development, there have been multiple community meetings. Now, my roots are in community development, so community meeting versus community engagement and that whole process. I wasn't here then, but I would say the relationship is very positive right now because there's been a fairly good line of communication. I think in the last few years that's only improved, you know, as the community has started to really think about its future, and they're just embarking on the first ever neighborhood plan for the community right now. So we need to sort of catch these things up with each other almost, but I would say the process, as I understand it to date, has had several rounds of community meetings and engagement. But Rob or Matt, you want to add to any of that in terms of your knowledge before mine?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's really interesting to know about this site is, so the steel mill shut down in late 90s, I think 98 or 97, and this site was really positioned to be bought by a bunch of developers to essentially build a suburban big box store plaza here on the site. And the foresight of the three foundations that came together to buy this site was, let's not let that happen again, because that's happened so many times to communities around here where essentially this would just become a walled off place for people from the suburbs to come shop at big box stores. That would do nothing for the surrounding community other than some minimum wage jobs in retail. It would do nothing for kind of the future of what this community could be. So there was real foresight in the foundations coming together and saying, let's not let that happen, let's buy this, let's be patient capital to sit on this and figure out how we can make this a really community supportive use that injects real value back into the region as a whole, but provides real opportunity for the neighborhood that's been there across the railroad tracks that suffered as a result of this steel mill closing down. People lost those union jobs. You know, this was a real pain for the community when the site shut down. So it's been a long process of sitting on the site and waiting until the time was right to really leverage that investment. And Rob can talk a little bit more about this, but as a part of that, which he sort of mentioned on the bus, we as foundations have begun to realize that what we do on this site is going to have a huge impact on that community across the railroad tracks. And we need to make sure that everything we're doing is incredibly intentional to ensure that we don't inadvertently cause displacement and cause gentrification and cause the people who've lived there for decades and decades to have to move or to see their rents go up in a way that they can't afford it. So we've made heavy investments into grassroots and community building in the neighborhood across the tracks. And Rob can talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but we're in a position now where we're trying to figure out how can we actually do big scale vertical development without displacement that redounds back to the benefit of the people who live here, and that this becomes an integral part of that community, not a walled off citadel that, you know, we've seen so often in the past, but a place where benefits that are happening here are spilling across. The culture and the vibrancy of that community is spilling into this site, and it's really a knitted together, integrated piece of a broader neighborhood. Rob, do you want to talk a little bit about what those investments in Hazelwood have looked like?
Sure, and maybe a little frame to put the last half an hour in some context. I would say 10 years ago, community development was literally about trying to make markets work again and not having any confidence that anything was going to come to materialize. So the East Liberty neighborhood you drove through, probably a working example of just that, only to have every last goddamn one happen. And what was a 2,000 person population, 1,000 newly constructed, high quality, well managed, affordable housing, from homeless, supportive, to kind of working family affordability, above the tax credit but below what the market rents. There's 1,000 newly constructed, well managed housing units in that. So that was the level of intention that happened on that side. That said, every deal and every mixed income unit has driven these $2,000 a month market rents. And what didn't exist at the founding of at the ideation phase, even at a community level, was the presumption of success, market success. It was never presumed. There was frustration. That was nothing was ever happening. There was general concern by the residents who lived in there about where they would be and where they would go. But the presumption of success was nowhere to be found. We're presuming success here. We're presuming that that neighborhood is going to experience stress like we've seen. We can own that right now. So right now, the community group, one of the most important things they're doing is working with our university to identify every household in the neighborhood and detail the likely households that can't sustain, starting with renters. Actually, we started with homeowners. A great nonprofit has renovated about 240 units of housing in the Hazelwood neighborhood, owned by predominantly low-income senior citizens. We saw in East Liberty the low-income homeowner that sequestered themselves to their living room and left the roof go because their house wasn't worth what the roof repair cost was. That's really the Homewood situation right now, that they got screwed. By the time it was time for transaction time, their families lost all that equity. A house to code in East Liberty is selling for 150, 200, not a great, well-managed. The newly constructed ones are turning over for $400,000 or $500,000. So crazy dynamic there. On the rental housing side, for the most part, most rental income has been produced for moms fighting for their kids, not necessarily for the mom across the street, right? And so in Hazelwood, we are, a community group is literally figuring out by address which families are not going to be able to sustain a sizable rental increase. We have no portfolio owners here. It's going to be very hard to have. I think there's 1 or 2 portfolio owners that own about 20 units. Those are the biggest ones we have in a neighborhood of about 5,500 people. So looking family by family, they're going to be doing some blocking and tackling from 2,000 units of 2,500 units of housing. There's probably 600 families that if we left and did nothing would be forced in what I would characterize, what others would characterize as essentially a black migration away from city services. Just a $40 a month rental increase away from moving to the next neighborhood that won't charge them that. And so we want to stop that. We want to build for the people who live here. This is not tearing down public housing and dealing with that. This is something more nuanced. We feel like we're behind the 8 ball. Rebecca talks about rebranding and re-identifying the site, and the ownership is genuinely nervous about that because every time you do that, that's a billboard that adds to the trauma of what living next to a redevelopment site looks like, right? We're not going to rebrand to Soda Popa or some. But just interesting, all of those things, and again, the foundations are in the role of gentrifier, and the level of responsibility there is pretty intense. We spent the last 7 years spending about $25 million in the neighborhood to rebuild infrastructure, bring schools back. We started by asking the neighborhood what have they wanted for a very long time that just hasn't come to fruition, and those ideas that had market sensibility were advanced by them, and they're ready to do it when the resources are there to do that. Now the next step is really to try to get ahead. That was social infrastructure, libraries, family support centers, schools. The next step really is about market harnessing, and that's art, magic, science, dope smoking. I mean, that was the most nerve-wracking side of the equation.
So thank you. No one tells that story like Rob, because he's lived it in various roles he's had in the city. What I'm going to propose based on time is anybody who doesn't mind getting potentially not deep mud, but a little mud, I will take a group over to just peek in to the mill building. We won't walk through it because there's pits and things, but if you want to just get a sense of it and you want to talk about, well, what is the market here? Because those are all good things, but we still got to get this site developed so that everybody can benefit from it. I will take a group that way, and Matt, why don't you come with me, and then Rob and Mike, if there's a group that wants to know more about neighborhood and connectivity and some of the infrastructure, I would say stay with that group, and the other group just come across the street with me. We'll leave the bus right here, so we instead of walking down the road.
There was a question about where we are on the map, if you could just point it
yes,
out one more time.
We are on the map.
Know where we are on the site.
This major long building is where we're at right here. So we're right on the road right here. Okay. And then you're gonna, what you'll do is you'll get back on the bus and we'll come out at Hazelwood Avenue and go straight up into the neighborhood from here.
Could you repeat the groups again?
One group is going to come with me and peek inside the mill building.
Construction jobs are kind of the, I don't know what the analogy of a reverse Trojan horse is, but everybody comes to get a construction job, right? What's never there for them is a career counselor to try to figure out, what we're doing with Mike is we're creating that pipeline. Heretofore in the city of Pittsburgh, you walk up to a fence in a development site and you say, how do I get a job on that site? Some union guy says, F you. Like that's usually the interface, not on purpose, it's just like, how do you get, you go through our apprenticeship program, all these artificial barriers, but we're in the ownership now. We can sign project labor management agreements that allow for them to go see Tom, and Tom gets them to a career counselor. You'll have 55-year-old women showing up saying, how do I get a job on the construction site? There's a dream about construction that's not really true. I mean, after $3 billion worth of development, if we created, you guys put the number 50 construction careers out of that, it would be bigger than any of its counterpart. But that creates, we think, a moment for connections tomorrow into healthcare, connections tomorrow into financial services, and a suite of training that we're setting up for free. Hazelwood is kind of first in line, but Hazelwood, Homewood, the Hill District are all nested and interrelated, and while they might not be spatially connected, this is a site that can change that condition as well. So, so we're thinking about connectivity and actually trying to be as purposeful as we can to break what is the seamless career opportunity for white suburban and bring that to black urban young people. So Carnegie Mellon University just got an $80 million grant to essentially commercialize 30 years of automated technology that they can build. Everything from AI to robotics is going to be housed in this building to automate that. That's got to be one of the biggest threats for undereducated job components. I'll defer to my job colleagues in the we've connected them, and they're deeply passionate now about a co-location and partnership with our community college around training for the technical positions that Carnegie Mellon grads are not going to be landing. So we think as companies want to be here, as they want to R&D, we can actually bring $60,000, $70,000 careers to the table with people who might just start with a GED and the ability to tinker. And our community college has a really nice mechatronics program predominantly geared for white suburban workers. We're going to co-locate them right into the setting. And regrettably, it's almost that micromanagement with every decision. And the reason to have the community so close to us is, white people constantly create unintended consequences for these communities. So these things are constantly vetted and recycled in a community setting. Doesn't make them glorious, but we're toiling through that. Yeah.
I'm Kim Ho from Sound Sage. I have actually two completely separate questions. So, all on the jobs.
I've officially become the target. This is totally brilliant.
Yes. My first question is, so glad to hear about essentially what's a workforce development program being co-located, but I also am wondering about like a community benefit agreement that would also maybe work in the school system so that the kids that are going to school here are part of a STEAM program or something like that, and then have opportunity to go to Carnegie Mellon, so it's not just the white folks that are going in there. I don't know if you guys have talked about anything like that.
We've launched a new charter school that does a great job with urban kids. We had no school. They had 3. All the schools were abandoned. So when we started working with the community, their first thing was community school. It's a K through 8. The intent would be to bring on a high school, as long as that doesn't crush a great high school that most kids go, a public high school right now, Alderdice. So there's some real market dynamics there. The answer is not no to these more thoughtful, aligned. We work with a woman, Carmen is not here, smart enough to have gone on the other tour. But we work with a woman who's trying to figure out how to align school district, housing authority, health department. These people don't talk to each other.
Right.
We literally have the school district doubling down and putting money into special elementary schools and having the housing authority deliver Section 8 vouchers the following month and telling folks they all have to leave. Literally abandoning the school that just got the investment so that it became vacant. This is Fort Pitt Elementary School in Garfield. It's a real story. So that's literally like 2 people have to go to breakfast every other month and just make sure they're touching base on the day. Port Authority, those kind of things. So aligning those bigger systems, we're having, like everybody else is having, this insider-outsider angst. We have a portfolio of people who live in the shadow of what was a shuttered mill for a very long time. They are as isolated, even though they're 2 miles away from Oakland, which is university town. Our library system is there, our school leadership, it's right there, but it takes a middle school child who goes to a middle school in Squirrel Hill about an hour and 40 minutes to use public transportation. So if they miss their bus, they're screwed if they have to be on public transportation. So we think aligning at that system level, what we're finding, and other people are probably like light years ahead of us, but what we're finding is the reality at a grassroots level is what gets those systems people thinking differently, not some hypothetical white paper from somebody's graduate thesis. Right. So I have a portfolio of young people. We're going to get CMU roboticists in our elementary school. We're going to do that this summer, right? And then they're going to tour this site. And as that thing unfolds, culinary, mechanics, hair, nail, and then the fallback to healthcare so that they don't have to step into the retail sector does not have to be what their career advancement plan needs to be. It can be, oh my God, there's different ways of getting into that stuff.
Could we pause for a second and just also hear, Medusa's been working a little bit in the community, and you want to offer some also perspective of how people are perceiving the site or interacting with the site?
I work with an organization called Hazelwood Youth Justice Program in Port Law, and so they've been, we've been having interactions about this particular site, good and bad. But what I'd like to say is that the Heinz Endowment has supported an operative to fund teaching artists to come into the community. And so the way that we bridge the gap between the conversation of housing development and education development is actually having alternative education. So by having an after-school program with the Hazelwood Youth Group, we've been able to talk about these intersections of what's happening in the community, and what does careers look like for you. So we particularly focus on teaching them media so that they can document their experience, and they have documented the, parts of this site, but they've also been documenting their own experience with wanting to make sure that they're included in this conversation, because these are people who have generations of living in this community. And they want to be a part of the conversation. They want to make sure that they're included. Like, they would love to not have to get a McDonald's job, right? And love to not have to work in retail, like that's the only option. So to know that there's going to be robotics or any type of AI or any type of opportunity to go to a CMU or a Pitt or anything like that, I think is awesome. And I think that, like I said, as long as we include the folks who live here in the conversation on what they really want, you know, and not just have like an outside conversation like you were saying, we'll make sure that we bring them in, bring them to the table so that they can talk about what it looks like to live in a sustainable community.
Yeah, and it's a, let me just say, we fund the people who will organize against us. It's part of the, I don't know, it's part of the ethos of the organization. That the organization she was talking about, the umbrella organization, did a great job in landing both the trainer and some funding for the trainer called A. Philip Randolph Institute, I think out of the Steelworker Union. A. Philip Randolph is steelworkers oriented. They have a Breaking the Chains of Poverty program inside that is a pre-apprenticeship program that helps get people through life skills and measurable skills to get on job sites. What they've not had the chance to do as the union is to have just-in-time training. So very hard to take a mom with kids who are working 2 jobs, pull her out of that, get into free training, and maybe nest it into a $60,000 career. That transition is really hard. Now, we funded steelworker after steelworker after steelworker to get paid to do those transitions. And I think we have to figure out something along those lines. But what we're doing now, since we're kind of a co-conspirator, is these guys are going to say, here's the schedule. Breaking the Chains of Poverty is a 16-week program. They need to recruit during this time period, and on this day to this day, what we're going to deliver to the unions or the selected contractors are qualified candidates who have gone through this training. What the unions don't want, and this is kind of it's news to me, the unions have no interest in being the savior of that neighborhood. The unions have no interest in having a job fair and telling 2,000 people who might show up that only 3 can work on the site, right? So what we want to do, and it's really through the community leadership, they brought this program to the table. The program graduates people, but there aren't jobs to absorb those folks, and we want to stop that stuff too. So we think there's an opportunity to do some just-in-time training through a multitude of sources, free up those opportunities on sites. We have a couple of unions that do non-apprenticeship involvement, 60-day, 90-day tests. They end up falling in love with these guys, and some are still excluded from it, but we think if we can bring a healthy system that brings qualified candidates, and then all the while, that's not a one pipeline strategy. You might be coming in for a job at Elmano, but we might be able to get you out of the retail thing, and at UPMC, we might be able to get you in healthcare in a way better situation tomorrow, but I know you want to be on that construction site. These are romantic, hypothetical notions that we'll all come back to hate if we don't stay diligent on it. These guys don't keep us honest.
Well, this is great conversation here, but if just a quick 2-minute overview of what you're standing on right here, I think is important for, we've constructed, and we've just come in from Oxford, we've just come in here recently to try to help finalize this, but basically what's been constructed on Elmano's behalf on the site is about 1.5 miles of a spine road through the development. So you entered at the far north end of the site, really only a couple parcels up to the north beyond that, and we run all the way down to connect into Hazelwood Boulevard, which is really, these are the 2 main connection points because of the existing railroad that are available for the site. And again, it's 1.5 miles of roadway here with, you can see the parking along both sides for future development. Really, all the utilities have been placed in the site in the road to get to development parcels as the development is finished. So all of that is really available in our main spine at this point. Really, the most interesting utility at this point is the stormwater that we've worked through. So the stormwater conveyance for the public end of the site has all been constructed. We've got capacity in our bioswales and stormwater sedimentation and detention ponds to service the entire site. So right now, as far as what's been completed in hardscape, all the roads drain to the tree beds and the bump outs to help support the public realm along the street, and then also drain and get to these other stormwater utilities. The other piece that we're standing on right now is our bike path or cycle track that runs from one end of the site to the other to again try to connect through this site to a larger infrastructure of bike that is growing throughout the city. And this is actually a little bit interesting from the stormwater side. It's a pervious asphalt material that will just basically soak up any of the stormwater straight through this and reduce some of the conveyance that's required throughout the site. So, I mean, that's kind of the bulk of it right now. We have all LED lighting as would be expected throughout the site, and everything's built to city standards to, at one point here, dedicate over to the city as a public street once the time is right. So.
And all of this, I mean, all of this honestly was, I think there's been 100 community meetings, but you get architects in front of the community and they relay this. It is what it is. Now that people can be down here and feel the site, the next public realm moves we want to make are literally let them be community designed and integrate. This was a very hard site to penetrate. There were negotiated with the general contractor, I think, 12 job opportunities over an 18 to 24 month time period. Okay. Worked with the community to try to bring a pipeline of people down. Only 4 came.
We're creating places that are affordable because of underinvestment in the infrastructure. So as you're putting in new infrastructure in this site, how is that impacting the surrounding neighborhoods, and are they getting infrastructure like sidewalks and these fancy bike lanes and all of that connecting, or is this just a pocket?
Yeah, really great question is how is infrastructure playing into the rest of the community and what's happening there, or is this just a pocket of new investment here?
And is there repair that can be done to that legacy from rail and highway through this project?
Yeah, and repair work. First of all, before I answer that, because you're going by it, this lovely fence is the Uber test track on the other side. We're actually working with a resident and artist and a group from the community to help with sort of like trying to enhance portions of that. And then you see it straight ahead. We're going to turn left right here, stay to the right, I believe, and you'll see a traffic light straight up ahead. And you'll just let me off right around the vicinity of the end of the road. You'll see the gate down there to go through. So to answer your question on infrastructure, first of all, the legacy of most of Pittsburgh and most of these types of these cities, you know, I mean, there's a legacy before railroads in this country, but railroads run along a lot of our riverfront. And in terms of, you know, that being a big part of the industrial past, it's here, it's staying, it's not really going anywhere in that respect. The connectivity and what's being enhanced, the Amano development is really focusing on infrastructure improvements specifically on the site, but we're also bringing that into sort of how do we connect, you know, through the pedestrian, the bike, the roadway improvements. And so actual sidewalk improvements in Hazelwood is a bigger, broader Hazelwood neighborhood project. It's not part of this because we can only fund things on the project. But I think since I have to jump off, Rob might be able to answer that a little bit more specifically. We're working with PennDOT in terms of some intercept points because we also have major transportation issues right around this whole area. And so it's a big question you're asking, and I don't have a good answer for how we really bring more funding to enhance a lot of the infrastructure within the Hazelwood neighborhood. I think a lot of that may come out of the neighborhood plan, in addition to their Main Street program that they're trying to do along their business district and some of the properties in that area. And so because I have to jump off the bus and I don't know that I have all of the knowledge of what's being planned in the neighborhood, I'm gonna actually punt over to Rob. He may be able to provide more answers on that. So I am gonna jump off. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day in Pittsburgh, and thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. When I first started at Pittsburgh United, I was the director of the Clean Rivers campaign, which is sort of a misnomer, but has really been focused on using green infrastructure to revitalize our neighborhoods while also addressing our clean water issues and our combined sewer overflows. On the other end of the Almano site is one of the largest combined sewer overflows in our whole system, and so and there's several large ones here through the Hazelwood neighborhood. So when we first started that campaign, with our partners, we knocked on a ton of doors in Hazelwood And we ended up doing a tour with our city council person who represents this area, and neighbors talked about the types of green infrastructure projects that they would want to see placed throughout the neighborhood to help revitalize it, and how it could impact this corridor, and how it could create some additional connectivity. And more recently, there's been just a ton of organizing around that sewer shed, that watershed. And Rob and others have mentioned the transportation corridor that might come from the site up to the university area. So there's just been a ton of community engagement around that. And I think there's still some real questions. Who's going to benefit? What is it going to look like? How are people going to access the site when there's only a couple of points? I think the level of engagement has been tremendous, but there's still some real key things that have to be worked out. The folks who, in many ways, are driving what's happening in the sewer shed that we're passing through are the people who've faced flooding over and over and over again because of the way that our sewer system was constructed and how they live in sort of the bottom of the funnel. And how can we address that through the transportation corridor, through the stormwater management in that site? Who's going to invest in that? Is it going to be the institutional partners, the foundations? You know, how's that all going to look? And those are big questions that we're wrestling with. And from the point of view of community partners, we want to make sure we're lifting up those concerns to say first, like, let's deal with flooding. Let's deal with the things that are impacting people's lives. How are they getting to work? What is that transportation going to look like? Who's it going to be for? So I just wanted to name that. I did want to open it up for questions for a few minutes for Medusa, for Larry and Celeste, other things about the site that Matt or Carmen or Rob might.
I'm really interested to know a little bit more about sort of the organizing infrastructure. Pittsburgh United clearly is a very simple player, but I bet there are more. And how did you find the indigenous leaders who might not be connected to Pittsburgh United, and sort of what are the ways in which groups have formed collaborations to make sure that all of the families are included in the opportunity to have a say in the future there?
So the question was from Lisa was a little bit more about the organizing infrastructure in Pittsburgh. And as I said earlier on the bus, it's not just Pittsburgh United. And I think your question was spoken like a true organizer. And even in the time I've been at Pittsburgh United, those things are always shifting. And we also want to find the folks in the neighborhood whose work is making a difference and needs more amplification. So there's, Celeste has an answer, and I will also, yeah, people, go for it.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Thank you.
So I come out of doing a lot of Black Lives Matter-like work in Pittsburgh. I have a lot of relationships in Pittsburgh. So when working on the affordable housing table, I always carried with me the idea that lived experience is the expert. So those are the people that when I went out to the community, I did a lot of community meetings out in the community with my organizing. Those are the people that that I always would come to and want to bring to those decision-making tables. So that's my organizing infrastructure, to always highlight and bring those indigenous leaders to the table, because these are the people that are the experts. They have lived this thing, and they know what they need. So that's part of my organizing, and to build those authentic and organic relationships and really let people know that we really care, and I really care about their work. So that's my answer.
I'll give you guys some fun statistics that I just looked up. In the United States, this is as of 2012, approximately 1.5 million nonprofit organizations. In the state of Pennsylvania, 62,831. 43,631 of those are 501c3 organizations. And in Pittsburgh, there are hundreds and hundreds of nonprofit organizations. So when you look at resources, which are very limited, and all these organizations constantly have their hands out, you're almost put in a position where you're forced to look to other organizations. In Homewood, Homewood is it's 1 square mile, and about between 5,000 and 6,000 residents. That's who we have access to. In order to get beyond that 6,000 people, Pittsburgh has about 305,000, I'm guessing. You have to work with other organizations. You have to look to see what they're doing. What is Pittsburgh United doing? What is Operation Better Block, who's officed right under us? What are they doing? The Community Empowerment Association, what are they doing? What is the Hill House doing? What is the YMCA doing? They all have access to different people who have different stories. So when you talk about the indigenous Pittsburghers, natives here, they'll look to a Homewood Children's Village and say, you guys are doing some great things. They'll look to Pittsburgh United and say, you guys are doing some great things. The lack of resources and the just overabundance of nonprofit organizations really puts the organizations at a point where we have to start working with each other. And a lot of foundations are requiring that in their applications now, saying, who are you working with? What organizations are you partnering with? And they'll award grants based on the organization that you have and who you're working with. So that's kind of where it's at right now in terms of organizing.
And just to echo what Larry was saying, I'm a part of, I mentioned earlier, something called the Transformative Art Process. And with that, we're connected with different organizations across the city that focus on cultural enrichment and art. And so what we've been able to do is, there's an organization that I was talking about earlier, Port Law. They've been on the ground in terms of making sure that, people are receiving services, that there is leadership development, and they've been engaging with the Alamano site. So they have been on the ground and making sure that they politicize their community about what's happening. Also, as Larry mentioned, there's an organization called Community Empowerment. They are turning out organizers. It may not be organizers in the sense of like union organizing in that regard, but I came through under their leadership. We work with something called SOUL, which is the School of Unity and Liberation, which basically trains people to organize youth in communities of color. So there are organizations that are on the ground that are not necessarily connected to this per se, but would love an opportunity to get involved. They would love an opportunity to learn to organize. There are youth all over this city who want to be organizers but don't have the skills or don't have organizations that can facilitate their growth and leadership development. So that would be a great operative to fund, is leadership development on the ground, so that we can build young organizers as well.
And to the question of a little bit what models are happening on a larger scale here in town, also we're gonna have some folks presenting about that in the session tomorrow, and so we'll have some space to talk about that more deeply. But thank you to all of you for those answers. Other questions? Yes.
It's going to be decades before that site is built out. And is there a formal mechanism for community engagement in decision making about that over that time? Is that embodied in a CBA or some other written document?
So the question was, is there a formal mechanism for community participation over the several decade-long development time frame of that site? And I don't know if Rob or Matt or others want to take that.
Yeah, the answer is no. Right now, we're not necessarily close to any of that activity we created in an effort to compete for a Spark application. We created a really great roundtable of stakeholders. And we actually want to keep competing because it's that site, that neighborhood. There's another small adjoining neighborhood. The universities give them a minimum seat at that table. So we actually think that, I apologize, we actually think that we convened a structure, and we think that that could be a great structure moving forward. And it was about community power. So we had a neighborhood filling more of those seats than us.
Great, thanks. Other questions? Yeah.
Where does the city and the state play into these questions, specifically with this site?
What is the city and state?
So the question was, where are the city and state in play in terms of the site?
The city's a partner. We meet every other month with the deputy, chief of staff to the mayor. So the city's an intimate partner. We get crushed at the bureaucratic level, like every other developer gets crushed at the bureaucratic level. The state has provided what resources they can provide. Are either of those entities on the same mission level? I don't believe so at this point. Again, like I don't know if you were there last night. We have a great mayor who's really interested in new ways of doing things because the old ways don't seem to be working for the folks who care about. So open to suggestions.
Thanks. We'll have more time for questions as we drive back and over lunch, but I'd like to hand it over to Monica Ruiz, who is an organizer with Casa San Jose, to talk about immigrant justice work here in the city, and we will be headed to our neighborhood.
Hi everyone. I'm not going to stand because I'll probably fall. So thank you for being here. We're headed now to Beachview. Beachview is where a small concentration of the Latino population live here in the city of Pittsburgh. I like to think that if you get a map of our county and sprinkle some dust all over it, that's where we are, right? And that's how many of us are here. There aren't very many of us here. But we do have a small concentration here in this neighborhood. My organization is Casa San Jose, and we are not located in this neighborhood. And there's many reasons why that is, and they're all terrible reasons, but we can talk about those later. But a lot of our families live here, and a lot of the work that I do is in this neighborhood. The majority of the families that I work with are from Central and South America, and the majority of the families that I work with are undocumented. And because of the fact that there hasn't been a big Latino migration here to this city, that has created even more problems because there's structures and systems in place that not only not help people that don't speak English, but actually hurt people. So what we do is a lot of advocacy and a lot of meeting with our elected officials, trying to see ways where we can change some of these systems and structures. And it's a lot of hard work, right? But I like to think that we have made some gains in certain areas. We do organizing in the community around worker rights. We have a lot of people who are injured on the job, especially construction sites. They fall off roofs, and because they're undocumented, they're left there to bleed or whatever. Or sometimes they're nice enough to drive them to an emergency room and just throw them there and drive off and threaten them not to tell where they were working. We have a lot of wage theft. Cases, and people work for 2 and 3 months for a job and they're not paid. And I don't know about anybody else on this bus, but if I weren't paid for 2 or 3 months, I'd be in a lot of trouble, right? Right, we have families to feed. Okay. We also have human trafficking that happen in our communities. I actually have a foster son from Guatemala who was being human trafficked when he got here. And I mean, thank God for many reasons that he's no longer in that situation, but he is now a striving high school student on honor roll at our local high school here. We also organize the youth, right? So we have 2 programs for youth. One is an after-school program at the high school. We have 25 mostly unaccompanied minors that recently came here to the United States that sometimes all of them do not speak English, and the majority of them, Spanish is their second language because they speak an indigenous language. And these youth have been working for 5+ years in their home countries, and then they come here and they're asked to go to school and they don't understand, and they just really want to work because that's what they came here for. So trying to help them understand The differences that exist here in this country and why they should be in school, and if they want to work they can after school or on the weekends, but just trying to teach them the differences in the cultures while preserving their own culture, because I think that a lot of us lose that here once we're here, and that's not doing anyone any good either. People talk about this melting pot. I don't want to melt. I like the way I look. I got a pretty tan color, right? So, trying to help others feel that same way, because especially in a place like Pittsburgh where there hasn't been a lot of diversity, people can be made to feel that you should look, act, and be like everyone else. We also do a lot of work around development and affordable housing, and trying to develop places properly, if that exists. But so we're going to go into Beachview right now, where I'm a part of this organization. It's called BRAG, the Beachview Revitalization Advisory Group. I don't know why they put me in there, because I think they're regretting it every single day, right? So I was really quiet through the selection process, and I think that did me some good, right? So basically what we do is any new development that wants to come into Beachview, we have a say of some sort about it, and I always have a say of some sort about it, because Beachview is really a nice neighborhood, and the T runs through it. I'm going to get up a little bit. The T runs through it, and the reason why a lot of the families live here is because they depend on that trolley to get to and from work. Here in the state of Pennsylvania, if you are undocumented, you cannot obtain a driver's license. So they need a way to get back and forth. So the rent is affordable. There's good transportation, but there's one development company that has come in and bought over 200 vacant units. That's not a good idea under any circumstances. But anyway, and he is now raising rents, and he is now, we could, again, that's another conversation that we can have. The other thing that we are now organizing around is the trolley system, right? So they want to go to a pay honor system, right? Which is great, because then you can pay and then you can just get on the trolley really quickly and go to where you need to be, except that they haven't told anyone. And if I speak English and I don't know about it, I can guarantee you that my Spanish-speaking families have no idea what's going on. And the problem, there's many problems, but one of the biggest problems is that then there's armed Port Authority officers that are going to be checking to see if you paid your ticket. And if you know anything about Port Authority police here in the city of Pittsburgh, they have killed people before, right? So that's not good. And when you don't speak the language, you don't know what's going on, you're an easy target. And the bigger problem is that then they have communication with ICE, right? So for encountering a faulty machine for $250, you could potentially then be deported. We also do a lot of work trying to change policies and put policies into place here in Pittsburgh to protect our undocumented families. We have developed a rapid response team, because when ICE comes to your house, it's never a good experience. They come at 6 o'clock in the morning and they drag your dad, husband, cousin, nephew out of their bed and traumatize the entire house. And then no one knows where they take you, or they take you when you leave the house and you never show up to work, and then your wife has no idea if you've been kidnapped, killed in an accident, or anything else. So we have 30+ volunteer attorneys who will be called at 6 a.m. mostly, who then we jump onto this, the rapid response mode, and we try to get as much information from the families and try to see if we can help maybe getting people out of detention, while they're still here, instead of waiting until they're transported somewhere else. This work is, like I said, a lot of work needs to be done. A lot of it hasn't been done because there hasn't been a big Latino population. It's still not big now. We were less than 2% of the population here in Pittsburgh. But I'm sick and tired of going to meetings and seeing people that don't look like me, because that tells me that all these years, a lot of decisions have been made about people like me without people like me being involved in decision making, right? And even though I'm at those tables, I'm still not the person that should be at those tables because I was born here and I speak English. And here are many people that don't fit that criteria. And they're the ones facing the consequences of these very strong decisions that are being made on their behalf without their interests being considered. What else could I talk about? Freedom cities, right? Okay, so we do not want to use the word sanctuary, right? Because when we think of sanctuary, we think of people from Central and South America living in a church basement, right? I don't want to live like that. Do any of you? No? Okay. So why don't we think about freedom cities and making our communities safe, right? And what about the African American population? Shouldn't they feel safe walking down the street like everyone else, right? So we want it to be all inclusive. We want everyone to be able to live in a city where their voices are being heard at the tables and where they don't have to live in fear of being arrested. Hold on, I think Sister Janice is going to come on now. Oh, we're going to get off, and then I'll talk a little bit more after.
There's been some questions around the political landscape here in Pittsburgh, so I'd just like to say a few words about that. For those who were here last night, you heard a little bit about our transition to having a more progressive mayor and a more progressive bloc on city council, and that lends itself to the complicated relationships that look like having an inside and an outside game. And for many of our partners who have C4s or our C5s, particularly our unions, they are able to play an inside game in a way that's more effective than many of the community groups have access to. And community groups are pushing from the outside, and we have to come together and make strategies that work for everyone so that our communities can get what they need. And then on some, it's not a monolith. We are inside on some issues, we're outside on some issues. It's actually a very complex relationship that I think we've seen play out in some different cities around the country with community organizations, with unions, with coalitions of folks, and how to do that, and how we have to come back to the sort of the theme of this tour, which is nimble advocacy and the ability to put resources where they're needed, put political capital where it's needed, and the relationships that really underpin the ability to do that. So I think that's both, that those relationships are about coming together and deciding things, but also about having some clear conversations about who's going to lead and what that's going to look like, because it can't always be the folks with the most political capital or the most money, and because that's not how our coalition should function. So I just wanted to say that word, a little underpinning on politics in our city. We are going to head back to the Energy Innovation Center, where there'll be 4 tables where we can discuss these issues even more deeply. And you can select what you would want to go to or check your email. So those tables will be an affordable housing and anti-displacement strategy table with Celeste and Larry and Bob Damewood from Regional Housing and Legal Services. We will have an immigrant justice table with Monica and Sister Janice. We'll have a worker justice and worker organizing table with Medusa and myself, and there'll be a P4 Almano table with Rob, Matt, other folks. So there's some choices for some deeper discussion to get into some more of the questions about the landscape or policy or organizing strategies that I know you have burning questions that you just haven't yelled out on the bus. So I thank you for traveling this long distance with us around Pittsburgh. Are there any other questions that people want to lift up right now? Yeah.
How do you manage all of the buckets, or sort of the power dynamics?
That's the $1 million question. How do we manage all these power dynamics? And I think one of the things that's been great about the direction that Pittsburgh United's tables have been moving around housing justice, environmental justice, and worker justice is really creating day-to-day space for community organizations and leaders to come together to make decisions and to have that power rest at those tables and to be really pinned in those relationships that are going on a daily basis. It's not about like a board meeting once a month or how are we dealing with this, but people knowing each other, people communicating, people developing campaigns together, and then talking about what's the next thing, how is this power translating to the next campaign. So it's constant.
Is your leadership pretty stable, or is there churn? How much churn?
I wouldn't want to speak for the everyone who organizes in Pittsburgh at all, obviously. Within Pittsburgh United, we have had pretty stable participation in our campaign tables. The Clean Rivers campaign table has been together for 6 years, almost the same core partners that entire time. The worker organizing table for a few years, similar, same partners all the time. Housing justice has seen a big expansion from Celeste's work, but I also would just say always there's like folks doing good work in the community, and we just want to create that infrastructure so that when there is work happening that needs support, that needs that nimble advocacy, that it isn't always just about what that table's creating, but about what the community needs. Other questions or other words from our, yep.
One of the things I didn't mention, at the Homewood Children's Village, we've been doing service to the community for about 6 years now. We've made a shift to a 2-generational approach where any child we help, we offer services to the parents and daycare providers, etc. When we were at the Hazelwood site, one of the comments that the woman made when we went to look at the whatever that big structure was, she said that over 50% of the jobs coming to this region will not require a 4-year degree. They're going to be specialized programs that the Community College of Allegheny County, referred to as CCAC here, they give those classes at CCAC. Unfortunately, they're about 45 minutes outside of the city, outside of the Hazelwood, Homewood, Hill area, out towards the airport. But that was an interesting statistic to me because when we keep talking about leadership, it's not enough to have leaders. You have to have leaders like that are looking in the right direction. And if we're talking to people and telling them to go get degrees and incur 6 figures in debt, when that's not really needed, and they're still not going to be able to get a job, they're not going to be much of a leader when they get out of college. They're going to be in debt and probably living in their parents' basement like a lot of people do when they go. Nothing wrong with that. I did that, but I just when I keep hearing the word leadership, and it makes me think about it's several levels. You have people who are at the nonprofit level, at the foundation level, and you have students who are going to lead the community. So just wanted to mention that statistic that over 50% of the jobs coming to Pittsburgh will not require a degree. That was very shocking to me.
Any other questions? We're coming up on the Energy Innovation Center here soon. I will say we'll have a panel, lunch and panel at the Energy Innovation Center. The panel will be about regional and state power building. And after that, around 3:30, if you would like to go on the site visit that we talked about yesterday, visiting the Giant Eagle on the south side to talk with workers about service sector jobs and what's going on in our local grocery store chain. We will be gathering around 3:30 to get back on the bus, and then the bus will return back to the Heinz Endowments near the hotel for the reception that's later. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask Liz, myself, or others from Heinz or Pittsburgh United, or NFG. So thank you so much for going on the tour, and look forward to some deeper discussion over lunch.